Hello, it's me and Cece back again to talk about privacy. Um, so, I'm not an expert at privacy. It's just an interest of mine. And so I may misspeak, and you may know more about this than I do because I'm sure there's some classes that go into this in more detail. But I felt like I couldn't not touch on it. Somehow I missed a lot of this in library school. I don't know if I because I was archives tracked, I kind of got the archives privacy, but I didn't get the public library privacy and the patron privacy. So librarians, just as a um, general rule, do not keep patron information. So we try not to gather patron information because we believe that patrons should be able to come in and research whatever they want and not be tracked. So and there are actually a lot of laws. There's a state law in Texas that protects us from having to divulge patron information. So it's a pretty big deal, and you will see that librarians will go to bat for patron privacy and refuse to turn over the information. And one of the best ways to help with this is to never gather patron information. But we're very data oriented people, so we like to gather information. It can be helpful. Um, it can be helpful if to get to know certain data points. And the thing is, we just have to not collect the difficult pieces or the personal identifying information or PPI. And we have to disaggregate the information about the data that we want to collect from the individuals. So it's a little bit difficult, and there may be experts in this class who know a lot more about how to do that. I know that anonymizing data is more difficult than it seems because a lot of times you can, if you have certain information, you can re-put that together. So you may think the data is anonymized, but it's actually easier to recreate the identities of the people. So it's just one of those things that we don't like to collect data on patrons. One thing to also know about is that patron librarian communications are not protected. So they are not confidential. If an attorney represents you and you sign, you agree to be represented by that attorney, any communication with that attorney, not any, because there are some that are not protectable, but most communications with that attorney are confidential and they can't be subpoenaed. You don't have to, the attorney doesn't have to testify against you. That is protected by law as confidential. The communications with a librarian are not protected. There are other protections. I know that it varies by state law, but doctor, patient, sometimes journalist, source. I don't know the laws about those, but I know that a lot of professions have their own ethics, right? So we just have to remind the patron that we can't, even if they say this is in confidence, we can't protect that. And that happens a lot where people say, well, this is in confidence. Well, if I am deposed or I'm subpoenaed, I have to tell that information, especially when there's a conflict. So you have to, I do it all the time. I tell employees who want to tell me their employment law problems, I have to tell them, look, I can't listen to this because if I was asked to protect myself, I would have to divulge this information. And that prevents them from telling you too much. And if they still want to tell you stuff and they know that, I don't want to know that because I find that, and I got really good advice. It wasn't personal advice, but it was advice at a conference from Kenny Cruz, who is a specialist in copyright. And he basically said, sometimes you have to know when to just walk away, when to leave the room. And I've actually done this at least one time, but I've ended a lot of conversations because of this. And it's a really true thing. Just I don't like to do talk to the hand. It's annoying. But you do sometimes have to not know the information and just walk away. It's difficult if you're sitting on the desk and people want to tell you a lot of things. But you can keep interrupting them and telling them, you know, if they're telling you something really, really private, you can break into it and say, look, you know, I can't keep this information confidential. What are the limits? So it's very difficult to know what the limits of privacy are. The constitutional limits are reasonable expectation of privacy. And that, I'm not an expert in that law, and I know that it's always shifting. Know that in your own personal space at work, you do not have a reasonable expectation of privacy for the contents of your computer, your email, your desk. So just be careful. This has gotten me personally into trouble before. If something happens, you know, right now your boss and your company may be really like, oh, use the internet, do whatever, use email, it's okay. I wouldn't. I don't use email for personal interactions because that's all discoverable. So I don't use my computer for personal interactions, and that's because it's discoverable, and it can also be used against you, and it's been used against me in a personnel way. I'll explain it all at some point, but I want to put it on I don't want to put it on a recording. But just know that if somebody has a beef against you, they can go in and look at all of your browsing history, and it's very easy to come back at you with things, you know, theft of time if you've been browsing the internet. Just be aware of that it's very difficult for you to, you know, I think most policies say you have an incidental use of your computer and your email, and I would keep it to that. Another thing, copiers, anything you copy on a copier, that actually can be retained. So I know they're always telling you, well, make a copy of passports, and they do that routinely when someone gets hired, but all that information is stored. There's a lot of issues with privacy. There's a lot of issues with privacy in terms of students and faculty. And so there's what's called FERPA, and that protects student privacy in higher education and secondary education too. And then there is children's privacy laws that protect children under 13. You may get into this and find, oh, I really need to find out more about this. It's a fascinating field. There are experts on Twitter that I encourage you to follow, because it is sort of the forefront, especially because of the technology that gathers data on us. And you guys may know more about this, but just realize it is an issue that you'll have to face. It comes up all the time.